prices because of that.
Yeah, super prices, Mike. Yeah, it's brilliant.
I know you're live now.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Oh, well, thank you, Gary, for joining us all the way from North Scotland.
No problem, Hannah.
Fantastic. Oh, yes, and we can see now that we're live on YouTube as well. That's nice and clear for everybody. Okay, a quick welcome to those of you that are already joining us. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes' time, and hopefully you've come to the right place, which is the webinar on transforming construction, shifting the focus, and we'll be starting in a minute or two. Okay, great. We're on 44 participants at the moment, so we'll give it another minute or so as well. Thanks to everyone who's joining us so far. You're joining the Bristol Housing Festival Virtual Expo. This is the Monday morning webinar on transforming construction, shifting the focus, and we'll be starting in 30 seconds to a minute or so. Okay then, Gary, shall we kick off? All right.
Okay. Hi there. My name is Gary Clark. I'm a Principal Regional Leader at HOK London Studio for Science, Technology and Sustainability. I'm also Chair of the RBA Sustainable Futures Group. We're very pleased to, in terms of HOK, very pleased to sponsor this event this morning. So just basically beginning the challenge really here is that we've really got to agree what we need to do to save our planet in the next year or so. Hopefully COP26 is going to be the impetus for that to happen in the UK. The second thing is we've got 10 years, this decade of action to really try and achieve that first sort of level of carbon reduction. Because the elephant in the room really is how we're going to sort of retrofit 45 million existing buildings in the UK. So beginning really with the RBA challenge, I was very good to be sort of part of that group where I wrote and edited all the RBA guidance that's just been released 2019 and this year. So the key thing there is the RBA 2030 challenge. So this sets a clear target for the construction industry to achieve net zero for new buildings for operational energy and embodied carbon by 2030. Now we've set 2030 because it allows 10 years for upskilling of the profession, and the same at HOK, we've got 10 years to achieve that. But actually HOK, we signed up the AIA 2030 commitment 10 years ago, so we've been tracking our carbon emissions for 10 years. We've now hit about 52% reduction based on code worldwide, so that's measured every year, but we've really got to get that that next 50% is going to be tough. So the RIBA 2030 challenge, what is that? It's basically operational energy net zero, embodied carbon net zero by 2030. It's a water reduction by 40% per building, and then we need a biodiversity net gain of between 10 and 20%. These are the key principles that we think we need to do, and we need to do it fast. We can't do it alone, and I think this is where, in terms of government and government agencies, all need to get behind us. What we need is really that 2030 challenge to be embodied into the new Sustainable Design Code, which is coming out through to UK government, and reinforced by building regulations. We need to move to a measurement and verification process. We can't just actually rely on predictions and not go back and check how our buildings are operating. We've got to get into the point where we've got to say these are predicted actual energy use of the building, and we need building regulations to go back in and check, and there's got to be independent certification of that. We can't achieve this just by the well wishes of the profession, even though some of us are doing quite well. So what we're asking really government to do is to do those things, and also the Sustainable Development Code is we've got to avoid this need, and I think the early pass of this, we can't deliver net zero by delivering a suburbia based on us all driving Teslas. It's got to be an urban, it's got to be a mixed use density, which really reinforces a walkable city and a mixed use city. So those are kind of key principles, and I think that's my time up, Hannah. So I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Gary. That's a fantastic way to start, and thank you very much to HOK London Studios for sponsoring the webinar and kicking it off as well.
Thank you very much.
So welcome everybody, I'm Hannah Gibson, and you're joining the Transforming Construction Shifting the Focus webinar, which is part of Bristol Housing Festival's Virtual Expo of 2020, a series of events and online content running for about 3 weeks, and we're about halfway through now. Hopefully you've been part of a few of them, and this one's going to start your week off well. You can probably see, and I just wanted to make you aware that we are also streaming this on YouTube, so you can watch it twice if you'd like to. Throughout the webinar, you'll be familiar, no doubt, with submitting questions in the Q&A box. I'd really encourage you to get involved in the conversation over the next hour, so that we've got that variation, but also so that these panelists don't just have questions from me. So please make sure we've got some variation and some of your input involved as well. So I work for UK Research and Innovation within the Transforming Construction Challenge, which is part of the government's Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, focused on raising productivity in the UK. And specifically within the Transforming Construction Challenge, we focus on making buildings and infrastructure more affordable, more efficient, safer and healthier. We invest in innovation and R&D around reducing carbon, improving productivity, investing in digital manufacturing processes, and looking into digital and data approaches where we can. And so much of today in this hour with our panelists is about how we demonstrate the impact of investing in innovation and the change that is underway with a focus on innovation and R&D. And that's why we've got a great selection of panelists here today to be talking about this. We've got Mike from the Transforming Construction Challenge, who will be going into a bit more detail around the Transforming Construction Challenge and our work on what that means longer term as well as now. We also have Benga from the University of West England. There's some really good Bristol representation on this webinar today. He's part of a UKRI funded project, Conversational BIM. Phil from YTKO, again, another Transforming Construction Challenge investment. And Phil works really closely with the Bristol Housing Festival on one of those projects and is resident webinar partaker in Bristol Housing Festival. So we can lean on you, Phil, if there's any problems today. And we also have Ellen from Bristol Housing Festival, who leads on evaluation and on closing the loop. So a really fantastic group of panelists to come today about how we demonstrate impact, we make the most of the shift that's underway in the sector. And you're going to see some of those real life examples from everybody here today. The panelists have been warned many a time that they have 5 minutes to give an opening statement or an overview. Sadly, I don't have the power to mute them. So after about 5 minutes, hopefully we won't need to. But if it gets to about 5 minutes, I'll be doing that painful thing that we've all seen where I have to interrupt someone on Zoom. But hopefully we won't get to that stage, and we'll just go one panelist for 5 minutes, a quick swap over to the next one quite quickly, and then we'll go into a discussion, a conversation, and really bring in your questions as well from the viewers. So please make sure they're coming through as people are giving their overview. So therefore, I'm going to hand over to Mike.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. So I'll immediately respond to Gary's points and kind of fill a bit more from what Hannah said. But in the Transforming Construction Challenge, I think we're already accelerating a change that's underway already within the sector. The UK is world leading in terms of its productivity and applying innovation towards that. But we want to move that transformation even quicker. We need to move away from a system that we have that works for no one. It doesn't work for clients, it doesn't work for supply chains or contractors. We've kind of got ourselves trapped in a system that doesn't deliver. What it does deliver really is waste. It delivers defects, and that contributes to that kind of performance gap that Gary was talking about within buildings. And work in the past from my team have shown that that can be 2.5 to 4 times the energy use from the design in the first place. So how do we cut that out? We need greater certainty in the builds, and that includes the projects being on budget and on time. And what's trapped us in this is this kind of focus on cheapness in our procurement approaches rather than looking at value, and it undermines value over time. And really the value of infrastructure is in its use. Data we've commissioned in the past says something like 43% of GDP is underpinned by the built environment. And how do we maximize the use of that? We want a future where our buildings and our infrastructure do what they need to do better and make life better for citizens. The government have bought into this. They have the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Programme. There's a commitment towards greater use of modern methods of construction through the construction sector deal, which the Transforming Construction Challenge is linked to. So we're just over halfway through a 4-year programme, 170 million investment from government, which is roughly 170 million more than it's ever given the construction sector in the past to do innovation. And what we're really trying to do is hit those big future targets that were set in the Construction 2025 strategy. Can we halve emissions, halve the time it takes to put projects together and deliver and hand over? Can we reduce cost by 1/3? And can we close that 15% productivity gap with the rest of the economy? And we think we can by adopting a platform manufacturing approach to the construction of buildings, learning from the manufacturing sector. And that's where an organisation like UKRI can really come in as we work across the whole of the economy, bringing in digitalisation, but standardisation of processes. You can't digitalise something that isn't a firm process in the first place, and that's a lot of what we've been learning. And how can we help government itself realise those ambitions towards procuring around whole life value? So a lot of our work is to make sure the commitment is pulling in the right place. And to make that widespread, supporting technical projects and advancements is one thing, but we realise a big part of this is to scale best practice and then share that as widely as possible. Tell the stories around this that'll help people really understand the concept and move things forward and finally shed some of that old way of doing things. And that's right the way through. That's from the smallest member of the supply chain right up to the biggest clients like the government itself. So, maybe we'll go into some more detail in the Q&A, but the kind of projects that we've funded, we've got the world's first platform-built office building from Landsec we're supporting, where they reckon they can pretty much boost productivity on that by 13 to 14%. We're supporting the biggest house builders in the country to take up methods where they think they can probably build 30% more houses with the same skilled workforce. And coming back to the net zero challenge, we're working with the Department for Education to change the design rules from the schools that they'll be procuring in the future. So the next framework, £2.5 billion framework, will be designs towards net zero. So we're building schools that the future needs, as we lock everything in. So happy to elaborate on that some more, and back to you, Hannah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate that, and very well timed. I'm going to hand over to Benga.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Yeah, my name is Olugbenga Kende, and I'm an associate professor from the University of the West of England in Bristol, and I'm also a deputy director of the Big Data Enterprise and Artificial Intelligence Lab at the same university, UWE Bristol. The lab is made up of, researchers who are passionate, in the use of emerging technologies to deliver better and certain results, within construction. I'll be talking on a project which we codenamed Conversational BIM, which is funded by EPSRC as part of the Transforming Construction Research Leadership Award. The title of the project is Integrating Conversational AI and Augmented Reality, that is AR, and BIM for faster and collaborative construction assembly. The principal investigator is Professor Lukman Oyedele, who is the director of the lab here in Bristol. And I'll be touching on how the project contributes to the transforming construction vision, of the UKRI and as well as the UK government. BIM is now widely adopted in the industry to improve collaboration and also to ensure time and cost certainty. So what we're trying to do with BIM is to enable speech-based queries. So you talk to BIM and BIM talks back to you. Alexa and Google Home, they are making, speech conversation with devices, they are becoming popular now. So we're trying to be, part of the early adopter of this technology, within the construction industry. So we've got three levels of innovation on the project. The first one is to enable conversational AI technologies, which also powers, tools like Alexa, such as Google Home. And this is groundbreaking for the construction industry, where you can use speech queries to get information from your BIM models. So information like, information about building components, dimensions, floor plan, quantity takeoff, and others. And also we want to enable immersive visualization of component assembly with real-time guidance. So AR is becoming popular within the industry. So we also want to contribute to the diffusion of that innovation, and also to improve collaborative practices and collaborative decision-making and visualization through a robust cloud-based platform. So talking about the impact of the Conversational BIM project, the first thing that we believe that the project will achieve is the reduction in the delivery time of the built assets. When you have quicker access to design information using natural interfaces, such as your voice and immersive and intuitive visualization, and also quicker BIM queries on construction sites as well as the back office. We also believe that the project is also going to help to close the construction productivity gap in terms of boosting, productivity through error-free assembly on site, providing step-by-step guidance to on-site workers, and also is going to support on-site, project control and decision-making, quicker decision-making. And also this tool can be adopted, to monitor construction progress. And also we believe, that the project is also to improve the uptake of digital technology within the industry and also the modern method of construction. It will help to diffuse digital innovation, emerging technologies like conversational AI and augmented reality for construction operations. And it will also improve the adoption of design for manufacture and assembly, the FMA, and also contribute to the off-site manufacturing agenda of the UK government. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you very much, much appreciated. I'm going to hand straight over to Phil.
Good morning, my name's Phil Stott. I'm the Head of Construction and Sustainability at YTKO. One quick point was the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen. I notice there's been no questions, so please do feel free to pop your thoughts, your queries, your ideas into that box. I'm going to claim those 30 seconds back because that's a bit of admin. I would like to start off by talking a little bit about our Innovate UK funded project, enabling housing innovation for inclusive growth. This is taking place in Bristol at the moment, and you may have heard me talk last week in a few of these webinars at the Bristol Housing Festival Virtual Expo about this programme. Now, this project is bringing together 9 modular or modern methods of construction housing solution providers in the city. These are real companies building real homes at the moment in the city. And these developers are coming together to explore new ways and new processes to improve the speed and efficiency that they are able to deliver housing, and also, most importantly, reduce the cost of housing. And that's not just the cost of the build, but also moving the idea of cost into more of a context of whole life cost of housing. So instead of building control coming around and signing off the build and the local authority going, well, that house cost X number of pounds per metre squared, and that was around about what we budgeted. We're trying to move that conversation into a point where they go, how much does it cost to live in that house? How much does it cost to maintain that house? And by creating a context of whole life cost instead of just as built cost, hopefully we're improving the case, the business case, for new and modular innovative ways of building housing. So we've got this project which has got these 9 developers building housing and trialing new things to build better quality homes as well. We're also working very closely with the local authority in Bristol City Council, alongside the Bristol Housing Festival and BRE, the Building Research Establishment, to be able to create new systems and processes within the council to procure and build housing quicker and better and to a better quality. So that's about optioneering and trialing new systems and tools and little bits of digital kit, which help people in the council to be able to say, you know what, I don't just want a house that operates at an EPC level B or an EPC level A. I want a house that's passive house. I want a house that generates net carbon zero through renewable technologies. I want a house that works for local businesses and creates local employment structures and skills. There's all these strategic goals that you occasionally hear about in Bristol coming out of an economic regrowth strategy or things like this. Actually, they control that in the procurement process to be able to find new housing. Ellen will speak after me a little bit about the council change model alongside some of the other evaluation work that they're doing. So I don't necessarily want to focus on that too much now. But I did want to just give a couple of minutes onto the context of this challenge. Sam Stacey, who's the lead for Transforming Construction in Innovate UK, called our project a powerful force for change. And although it sounds a little bit like we're just getting some people to tweak some processes, it is actually a very important step change in construction. Construction is defined by a culture of cost. They don't invest in innovation because it's too expensive. We build houses in the main the same way we've always built houses in this country. They don't invest in skills because it's too expensive and the cost always falls on the contractors. They don't invest in benefits, well-being. They don't invest in even health and safety until government really made them do it in the 80s and 90s. It used to be the case that actually the most dangerous job in the UK wasn't always being a North Sea fisherman. Sometimes it was actually working on a construction site. Even now, today, you've got some of the highest rates of suicide in men in construction. Construction is an unattractive, broken sector. I've had 3 or 4 politicians in the last week on various webinars laugh at the idea that someone from the creative sectors would ever want to retrain in construction. And I think we need to change this. I think construction is full of designers. It's full of innovative advocates of architecture. It is full of absolute cutting edge technology in terms of manufacture processes. But these are only the green shoots. We are trying to change an oil tanker that has been building things in the same way for hundreds of years. And we're trying to now get it to start to be a sector which pushes inclusivity, pushes diversity. And what's more, builds homes that are high quality, stand the test of time, and raise the bar. If we can change this from being the cheapest, nastiest solution to actually being a cost-effective, high-quality solution, then we recontextualize the whole conversation around construction. And for me, I want this sector over the next 100 years to be something that we can be really, truly proud of in this country and that we're world leaders in. So I think that is my 5 minutes up, and I will now pass back to Hannah.
Thank you very much, Phil. Fantastically timed. Okay, then, and over to you, Ellen.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Yeah, much like the UK RI, the Bristol Housing Festival really recognises the power of storytelling. We recognise that throughout human history that stories have been used to teach and to pass on learned wisdom. So there's something uniquely engaging and insightful about stories. And we believe that they've got the power to change the realm of possibilities for those that are listening to them. One way that the construction industry is currently being transformed, as we've seen, is in the growth of off-site manufacturing of housing. And we recognise that it's early days, but this radical transformation of this sector, we still think has scope for either positive or negative storylines to emerge. The growth of off-site construction could enable cleaner, greener housing. It could improve our choice when it comes to housing, create safer and more inclusive jobs, and it could help shape better places and communities. Or alternatively, it could result in a handful of companies churning out increasingly cheap, in inverted commas, performing housing, which could reduce employment opportunities and skills. It could reduce choice, and it could end up creating samey, unhappy, and unhealthy places. And periods of industry transformation like we're seeing at the moment really just create a window of opportunity to stand back and think strategically about what it is we want to see happen, and to engage new networks and really just start writing new narratives about what we want to see happen. Bristol Housing Festival is working with Bristol City Council and YTK and other partners to engage in a piece of collaborative action learning in housing. We're working with a host of suppliers, and we're actually building out a spectrum of technologies in the city, using different models of community and place, and using this as an opportunity to share as widely as possible what it is that works, what doesn't, and where there's opportunities for improvement. And as the Housing Festival, our role is very much about closing this loop and using these prototype schemes to collect real data, and to actually just go around some quite small loops really quite quickly to maximise the rate at which we are collectively learning and enhancing best practice before modular housing starts being deployed at any real scale. And as Gary certainly said, it's said this morning, critical to this sort of process of closing the loop is evaluating the performance of these buildings in occupation. It's really in occupation that the impact of these innovations is seen, and it's also where a lot of the value of these projects is actually derived. Just briefly to share one sort of real example, I'll talk briefly about the ZEDpods scheme, purely because that's literally being sort of completed on site as we speak. By way of a bit of context of the project, the ZEDpods development is a scheme of it's a terrace of 11 zero carbon 1-bedroom starter homes that are being constructed on a raised platform over an existing and operational public car park in St George, Bristol. The homes are predominantly timber, they're CLT, they're highly insulated, triple glazed windows, they're fitted with highly energy efficient technology, micro air source heat pumps, and have solar PV installed on the roofs. The scheme is 100% affordable. All the rents are either set at local housing authority rates or at the lower still social rent levels. The scheme's really been designed to meet the needs of a mix of young people who are either waiting for council housing or moving on from emergency accommodation. And in a brand new approach for Bristol City Council, there's also two 2-bedroom homes within the development, which are being rented out to young people who are going to work with the YMCA in Bristol to provide a community building role. So you can really see that this project from the outset has really been designed with a heart for these young people, but will it work, and will it be a success, and what does success look like? And I think that's what the post-occupancy evaluation of this scheme is about. Just very briefly, there are 6 streams of the research that we are doing as part of the post-occupancy evaluation of this scheme, and I'll just run through them briefly. We're measuring the energy that's generated by the solar PVs and comparing that with the electricity usage of all the residents. We're working with the Centre of Thriving Places. They have a happiness pulse survey tool, which we're using to assess the sort of general well-being and happiness of the residents. we're working with academics in the Department of Architecture at UWE, who are going to do a couple of interviews with each resident one-to-one over the course of the first year, just to really unpack their sort of lived experience of living in their new homes. Each resident will have an app on their mobile phone, which will allow them to provide immediate feedback, when they're feeling uncomfortable in their environment, if they're too hot, too cold, etc. 5 of the 11 homes are going to be installed with sensors, which will provide continuous measurement of actual data. So we're monitoring the temperature, light level, humidity and air quality in the downstairs living area of each of those 5 homes. And also we're just generally capturing some project data to include rental income, arrears, the amount of support given by the project partners, and the engagement of the residents in education and employment, as well as in the local community. Just very briefly as I finish, just to thank Commonweal Housing, who provided the funding for that, or the initial grant funding for that research programme, as well as UWE and ZEDpods, who've contributed additional funding. Thank you, Hannah.
Thanks very much, Ellen. That was a great overview, and so good to see, as with all of the presentations, the amount of trends and overlapping and patterns that are coming through all of the pieces of work that you're working on. I'd like to then go back to that theme that we're seeing around whole life value versus cost, which is coming out in each of your presentations. And perhaps starting with Mike, could you tell us a bit more about what we mean by whole life value?
So I think there's 2 kind of levels to this. So some of it has been talked about, things like running costs, and it's kind of perverse that we have a media that focuses on the capital cost of large-scale projects and kind of ignores the running cost. And sometimes, there can be make quite a bit of sense to spend a bit more up front to mean that the costs of running the facility are a lot cheaper. And that varies, of course, from different sector to sector. When it comes to buildings, with houses, we don't really have a public demanding it, and maybe that's where some of the storytelling work can happen. And of course, with a lot of commercial property, the people who are using it are not the people who paid for it to be built. And this is why we're working with a lot of social infrastructure funded by government, where actually the government can see over time the cost of running facilities would work out. And it's, if you look at something like housing, a passive house, some work from the UK GBC said that really, the kind of capital uplift you'd look to achieve passive house standards is probably somewhere around 5%. Significant, but when compared against running costs, that's pretty good. But then when you bring in the other side of it, and then a kind of performance angle, whenever you're doing things to high sustainability standards and thinking in the right kind of way with innovation, and I've seen this throughout my career in all sorts of sectors, you tend to have lots of other co-benefits that you weren't expecting. And if you build very sustainable, clean schools with good airflows, and you think about some of the performance in that, you can enhance what they're built for. So imagine where the cognitive performance of children are enhanced, so they learn better, they feel happier and fresher, and so do the teachers. It's these small margins can really add up over time, and we're getting to the point where we're able to measure that kind of thing now. The science is evolving, and that's where social scientists and creative people coming in can really input to that, and then feed back into BIM models, and we design based upon what's working. In terms of performance, as well as the kind of cost of maintenance.
Thank you, Mike. And I think that lends itself really well to the way that Phil was describing the investment with YTKO, and that move from a cheap, quick build to one focused on that longer term value. For you, Phil, how did that come about? What drove you to work in that way?
I think it's a case of, funnily enough, we talked a bit about the performance gap. I did a few years on the Green Construction Board, where we had potentially, and Mike mentioned, sort of 2 or 3, we had about 5 times the gap of someone would design a building, put people into it, everyone would open windows. And I think the other thing to consider is, when you're dealing with social housing, you need to consider the maintenance costs of these builds. the average energy bill is maybe around about £1,300 a year. And actually, if you can drop that down to 200, £100 a year to heat and light your home, that's a major, cost saving in terms of the potentially most vulnerable in the society. And I think if you do start to move, and even with the best will in the world and the best intentions in the world, you will find that clients do think in terms of that limited fabric build. Once the house is up, I'm done. I've done my job. It's great. It was there. Haven't I met my targets? Round of applause for me. And actually, what you need to start doing is thinking about, well, if maintenance then spend the next, jump in 10 years' time to sort out the roof because it's leaking, sort out the condensation because it's not performing, sort out the airflow. And this is really unsexy stuff. This is all little gaps and thermal bridges in the building that are undermining the performance. I spent a long few months shouting at Sky TV because they kept drilling holes through people's walls, which meant that you undermine the fabric performance. And I think a gap the size of a pound coin in your wall can create a double cost to your energy performance. So for me, this is about making sure that these homes stack up, not just in terms of performance, but also in terms of livability, so that the people who live in these homes have a home that works for them.
I got quite a good anecdote talking about story power here. So one of the big social housing providers in the UK told me that they did do some retrofit work on some of the properties they had, and they were surprised that the energy bills hadn't changed for the occupants. But when they went to check that out, they realised that the occupants were now able to heat the whole home for the same cost that in the past they were heating a single room. And that transformed the perception of that building for those occupants. So again, building a business case is difficult. It's not sexy stuff, but like you say, you've now got a lot less call outs for antisocial behavior, because they now love that home rather than kind of generally hating it. And some of these, these are, not necessarily intuitive hidden costs. And when we start to look at things in a whole life value way, you find it's actually worth doing some of these other things in advance.
Yeah, and that's again where it's worth taking the time to invest in, for example, with Benga's project, that behind the scenes, the complex tech that comes behind it is worth it then being really translatable. This is how it is changing someone's life, that human story of it as well. I'm interested, Benga, in how you have found, coming from the academic side, working on this piece of work and the kind of industry engagement as well. How have you found joining the dots between industry and academia?
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Yeah, the plan that we had for the project before the lockdown was to have some on-site demonstrations and trialing of the tool in terms of hands-on trialing, because the approach we adopted is a user-centric approach. It is not what we think they need we are developing. We're actually developing what they actually need on site. So what the plan for that is, some of the sites are opening this month, and we're going to start some of the hands-on trialing, on-site trialing, sometimes in November. And during the lockdown, we actually planned some workshops, which we have to move online. So during the lockdown, we're able to organize 2 of these, of the workshops, which were really good to get feedback from. We had some demonstration and we got feedback from some of the industry partners and some stakeholders. And also the TCN Plus, the Transforming Construction Network Plus, they've been really helpful. In the last newsletter, we had like a summary of the project published, which has really created a lot of engagement with the industry. Yeah.
Nice. That's really good to hear that those various organisations are all playing their part to make it happen. That's great. Well, thanks, Phil, because we've got lots of questions coming in now, which I'm really pleased to see. But I just wanted one final question for Ellen, actually, around all the work that you've been doing. How are you planning to capture and disseminate all of these learnings?
Mm-hmm. So for the ZEDpods scheme, we've already produced a lessons learnt report, which tells just the story so far. So even just the process of getting from the idea that was, could we make this technology work in Bristol, to this point, sort of to today, really, whereby the houses are finished on site. So that story so far is already written up into a report that will be published next week, actually, and available through the Housing Festival's website. And that we pulled together in a series of interviews with the project team. So there's lots of information about the story so far. And then once we've sort of gone through this post-occupancy evaluation process, we'll be working with UWE to produce some reports and reporting back to Commonwealth. So there will be lots of information that becomes available.
Okay, so watch this space then. That's good timing. Fantastic. Okay, then we'll go to some of the Q&As now. We have a question for Mike. With the government focusing on expanding R&D as central to the COVID recovery and hosting COP26 next year, how do you see the Transforming Construction programme changing and possibly expanding over the next 12 months? Will the scope increase to include retrofit, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, of course, the programme has committed its money and it has a clear set of targets it's trying to achieve as part of its business case. But what we are having now is more and more conversation with government. In fact, we've seen probably more pull from government than we expected, or it's coming faster than we expected, which is really exciting. And I think that's because procuring departments do see the need to take a more value-led approach. And hopefully we'll see the government support and commit and accelerate that programme to say, let's really try and commit to taking a platform approach. As you've probably heard, they want to build back greener, better, faster, and better does mean better buildings, not producing the same old rubbish the same way, in a new way. And greener they do mean about net zero. As I said, the work with DFE is really, really exciting, and we're helping them move a lot quicker than they would have done. And can we build buildings more quickly? And we think that's one of the advantages of a kind of platform approach. So hopefully we'll see a boost in that area. But the aim always was that we wanted to help the sector accelerate towards an industrialized approach, standardizing processes, still getting bespoke outputs, but standardizing processes to be able to achieve scale in terms of standardization and bringing down cost. That's really what every manufacturing sector has done to achieve greater quality while reducing cost. And that's what's needed for the next stage in retrofit. We know retrofit works. We can make buildings use virtually no energy. And really the decarbonisation of heat agenda can only go forward with improving the energy efficiency of buildings. And probably the only way we can do that at scale quickly enough is to industrialise that approach. So taking over some of the ideas we have now into such an approach is what we want to do. I think a lot of things are coming in terms of market demand, financial products, are kind of developing in the right way. What's needed is a reduction in the cost, and that can only come through innovation at scale, which is what you've seen for batteries, is what you've seen for wind farms, for solar, for lots of other kind of technologies that are going to help us achieve the net zero targets. So yeah, I will try and succeed in getting that funding or die trying.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And then I guess that kind of leads into a similar question that's come as well around, someone's asked, do you find, and this is a question for everybody as well, do you find that the large developers are receptive to your work? And this question says that currently they seem to be continuing with the cheapest construction costs they can get away with.
I'm happy to go first. I mean, I think it's an absolute scandal that we're still building homes that aren't net zero right now. Because why would you buy a brand new home right now knowing within the next 20 years you're going to have to retrofit it? You're basically buying it with a future cost attached to it. It's insane that the market still works that way. But what I will say is the focus really has been, I think, for the sector to boost productivity, deal with the real issue you've got of a lack of skilled workforce. And the drive of the burning platform for the sector really has been to be able to hit the growth the government's asking for in terms of housing building with the limited and diminishing skilled workforce we have. But that creates an opportunity to bring in an approach that will help them hit net zero. I mean, the big developers are all making very bold statements in terms of delivering net zero earlier than 2050.
Did you want to come in on that, Phil?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I would say the big uns are there as well as the little uns. We do have the likes of Legal in General, who are, I think, once mentioned in the papers as being the largest housing company that no one's ever heard of. And the idea is basically that, the likes of Skanska, Bukluk, who are basically IKEA's version. So the large companies are coming into this, but their approach tends to be a bit more what we call volumetric, which is potentially what you might have seen when you've seen modular housing produced, where it's almost like a house arrives on the back of a lorry, having come out of a factory, automated. The slight problem with this is that you do need a big bit of land, because volumetric tends to work in volume. What you can have as well is a blend of panelized smaller systems. And myself and Jez from the Bristol Housing Festival have often spoken about the need not just to aggregate land and not just to bring together large scale manufacturing processes, but also to allow smaller companies as well to have a role. And I noticed there's been a few questions on SMEs, and I think the need to bring in the smaller supply chain as well is equally important. In some of the procurement frameworks, who are basically the way we allow a lot of MMC to be built, we are seeing that actually smaller panelized systems and bespoke flexible systems are needed. And this tends to be where the smaller companies play a role, because if you have a smaller, more flexible panelized system, it means that you can flex to design needs on site. It means that you might be able to fit in more units onto a site. Whereas if you're saying, no, the houses look like this, they're this size, and this is how they come, because we needed to produce them like this for volumetric, then you do tend to need a sort of a larger blank canvas of a site to work on. In Bristol, almost all the sites that we have available for housing are small, and they need to be sort of bundled up into packages, and therefore they will need tailored, bespoke, full turnkey systems.
Thank you. So your advice in terms of how we help SMEs get involved in this and how they scale up and adopt new innovations is actually to focus on kind of your kind of city regions rather than looking at your larger.
I mean, yeah, this is I was trying to be good there and not get on my soapbox about SMEs. So YTKO is an SME. YTKO's philosophy is built around the needs of the SME. And SME, often people think about larger players. Actually, SMEs, we're talking about micros and sole traders. My biggest worry about MMC and modular, and I try not to say this too often, because I think the benefits outweigh the risks. The one risk is it displaces local labor and local companies. There are plumbers, electricians, dry liners, renderers, extension providers who are all perfectly skilled to work with MMC. They don't know it's coming. And actually, there's a huge skills piece in bringing and building pathways for existing trades to work with MMC providers. Because I'll tell you, there's two things here. It's not just we're going into factories and everyone's producing wonderfully built modular homes. People who are working in MMC quite often will be coming from an entire system built process. What would be quite nice is to build in 30, 40, 50 years of construction knowledge into that mix. Similarly, it'd be nice to give people who work on the traditional trades the opportunity to work with these new systems, and actually creating these pathways and these sort of opportunities to transfer skills is where SMEs can play a real role, because I'm not having local companies in Bristol and the West being displaced. Because you might find that in the next 5 years, 50% of all housing is built using MMC systems. And if that is the case, that's fantastic, because we'll be getting cheaper, quicker, and better performing homes. However, I don't want that at the cost of displacing local labor. So we're finding ways and solutions to make sure local SMEs have a role to play. And the likes in our project, Northwest Media Centre, are doing that with a real social conscience in South Bristol. So yeah, we are very aware of that issue. And it's something that personally is my big soapbox that I like to stand on and shout about.
Well, you're in the right place for it here. And presumably, Ellen, from an evaluation perspective, a lot of what Phil's just been talking about is what you're hoping to see coming out of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly a lot of outcomes. I didn't have a chance to go through it this morning, but lots of sort of desired outcomes for that ZEDpods project that we could sort of list out. I guess in headline, the outcomes that we'd want is to see that the young people in those homes, that you could say that they're thriving, and secondly that yes, that this is a scheme that you'd want to replicate in or scale up in other parts of the city. And I guess we're not going to know where it's appropriate to reproduce it, or at what scale it's appropriate to do so, until we've got some of the results of this evaluation coming back through. So yes, absolutely.
Benga.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Phil said in terms of how SMEs can adopt these new technologies and how they can also, be more active in this space. Some of the challenges, confronting SMEs is the costs associated with innovation and also the risk. So one of the ways of, mitigating that is, collaboration with big businesses. They've got, large budgets for, R&D budgets, which they can use to de-risk innovation, and also that is why we have Innovate UK and other funding body. They can as well, try to, access the funding opportunity from Innovate UK to de-risk those innovations. I believe that would be really helpful to SMEs.
Yeah, absolutely. Benga, I also saw another question come in, interested in finding out a bit more about your project and how they might be able to find out even more of the complexities of it, etc. How would you signpost people to find out more about your work?
Yeah, we've got like a web page on the university's website. So if you just search for Conversational BIM, you will be linked to, get a link to the web page. And we've got some contact information on the page. If you send an email, we'll be happy to probably organize a demonstration and probably, receive your feedback about the software we're trying to develop at UWE Bristol.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm actually interested whether Gary would like to come back in and see that challenge that he put to us getting on for an hour ago, whether he'd like to respond to it or add any comments, Gary.
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me back in. So I will switch my thing. So fantastic examples there, particularly interested in the ZEDpods. I used to work with Bill Dunster back in the day with we're both at Hopkins. So I think the main thing really is I think two things. One, how much innovation do we need to create? Okay, so all these ideas are fantastic, but I'm from Bill Dunster as well. We think we know how to solve it. Okay, we do think we know. We don't really have time to do really long pieces of research here. Obviously, we need to kind of have maybe different levels, but that's why the RBA, we're writing in, it's a light touch POE a year after the end of the defects period. Okay, so it's really quick. We need the speed of discovery and the speed of failure really needs to speed up, really. That's the main thing. So how much innovation? I would say crack on, because Goldsmith Street, which won the Sterling Prize last year, judged it. It was the company's second passive house project. They'd never worked in passive house before after that, and they achieved a passive house, and they're now doing it. And that is then spread like ripple effect right through all the councils of the UK. We need those sorts of things. So I think people listen to this, really, there's no time. The actual terms of LETI, in terms of AACB, the RBA guides, we're all working together to give you that upskilling as quickly as possible. Don't wait, crack on, have a go. Thanks.
No, thanks, Gary. And I think that's very much the approach we took. We didn't think the Transforming Construction program was going to be lots and lots of funding, long-term innovation, or too much research. I think there is some stuff in terms of some of that longer idea around how we really tie performance back in some of the I guess the woollier areas, the stuff where we don't really have that link between the physical parameters of the building and the connection that has through to things like cognitive performance of its occupants. But really, a lot of it we know how to do, and a lot of the program really has been to say to people, let's share the risk with you in scaling this up and doing what you've been wanting to do for a while, and then telling everybody about it. Exactly as you said, that ripples really quickly then, and then you do see that big pull or greater pull coming from clients, and the confidence that's building for us within government procurement. We need to keep this momentum up, and we need some of these big projects to keep working and hitting these what we thought were, quite frankly, unreasonable targets, but not unrealistic. Yeah. And when you do start proving it can be done, that's when people's minds start to change.
Yeah, great.
Just to come back then on Gary and Mike's comments there, and just to allude what Mike opened the session with, M&E, and Gary alluded to this as well. sometimes research is about research and finding new ways of doing things. Sometimes it's actually about checking the innovation and measure and verify and evaluate. And I feel that actually some of the stuff that we're doing in our project has that in spades, and some of the work Ellen's doing as well, where we're actually saying, okay, you know, they innovated, they checked, they saw, and then we want to measure what the impact is once people live in that. And the second point was around impact. I hate projects which produce a report that everyone has, you know, drinks over and says, well done, and then no one, and then it sits on a shelf and doesn't change anything. These projects, what's great about Innovate UK funding, and I'd almost say it's unique in this regard, is it's all about almost an investment approach. They're saying, I mean, they should change it to Investment UK. We basically face this challenge now where they say, right, we gave you the money, now show us how you're going to change the industry. And that's a great challenge, because it doesn't come at the end, doesn't come in the last week. We get beaten up about it pretty much from day one. And I love that, because our project will produce things that will change this sector, and there'll be commercial products. You know, we'll make money, because I'll tell you one thing, if it's not commercial, it definitely won't exist in construction in 2 years' time. So I would say my quick plug at the end of this is to say, we're going to send out a link to all the attendees. And if you're an SME business, if you're a MMC manufacturer, or if you're in fact a local authority or a client, or just someone who wants to get involved, please do get in touch, because I'm really conscious that there's a lot of great people on this call. You know, there's 53 attendees to this call at the moment, and we've actually grown it rather than lost people, which is always good. And I think that if anyone wants to get involved, please do get in touch, because what we're trying to do is create commercial opportunities for businesses that wouldn't always have them, to get involved in MMC, get involved in public procurement, get involved in procurement opportunities with local authorities. So please do get in touch with the Enabling Housing Innovation for Inclusive Growth project.
Thank you, Phil. And that's certainly, I know, music to our ears from Transforming Construction. So thank you very much. Any final comments before we begin to wrap up, everybody?
Could just make one further point, just in terms of Mike and Phil's response there. I think you're right, and I think the way you define it's not innovate, it's invest, I think is critical, and the speed. So we're not inventing new things and then to research from blue sky. This is about applied research and what works in reality, and that's where we need that 10-year cycles. We need to make sure that the things that don't work actually are phased out quickly, and then we need to focus on the things that do work and do deliver sort of net zero by that 2030 date. So really all power to you guys to spread the word. So brilliant stuff.
Well, one theme I really enjoyed that you started, Gary, and has kind of carried on in the Q&A with some energy, and it would do in Bristol of all places, you know, is that input from the creative side. You know, maybe that's where we could have funded even more research, and we certainly want more engagement. And I would encourage any construction company to go and talk to people who understand people and how they work. You know, it's, as we say, it's very easy to design a building that works perfectly if no one's in it. It always reminds me of, you know, when I used to play cricket, and you'd say to the groundsman, you complain about the state of the pitch, and he'd say, well, I can make a perfect strip if only you buggers didn't play on it. You know, and that's kind of what we're stuck with. So let's take the knowledge that's there with people who understand about behavior and that kind of approach and bring that into what we're doing. I think that's where we go next.
Great.
Any other final comments, Ellen or Benga?
Well, really just to reiterate, I think sort of we've got all the technical solutions, like it's working out that how we're going to apply them and that implementation stage that I think is the real key thing to nail next.
And how we had to what Ellen said, you know, do not look away from universities. You know, we've got very, you know, robust research base within the universities. You know, we are also looking to collaborate with SMEs, with large companies. So if you have any innovation you're trying to work on, or, you know, probably working on any application or investment opportunity, like Mike put it, you know, we'll be happy to talk. Thank you, Anna.
Fantastic. Oh, well, that was the quickest hour of a Monday ever. Thank you very much for your reviews, your conversations, and the questions that came through as well. It's really clear the effects of innovation and investing in new ways of working, and the extent to which that's already having an impact, and indeed, Gary, that point on the urgency of it as well. I'd really encourage particularly those who are listening to make your connections from here, reach out to people that you've been particularly interested in, and also bring those people that are reticent with you as well, because we need the early adopters, but we need everybody as well. So please make your connections from today. A huge thanks to the panelists and to Gary and HOK London Studio. Thank you for all of you for joining us, and indeed carry on signing up for all of the events and keep being part of this conversation as well through the Bristol Housing Festival website. Thanks very much. Bye.